everyone. I'm Noreen Purcell Dillman, the creator of the Healthy Peaceful podcast. About me, I describe myself as a former attorney, YouTuber, natural food chef, wellness guru. No, that's not a typo. It actually means precious one. If you haven't been following me, you may be wondering what this podcast of 4 years is all about. It's a place where I interview individuals on topics pertaining to the meaning of health and well-being, personal and collective consciousness, and maximizing full human potential. This episode is a part of a series between me and Chef Rich LaMarita. During this series, we delve into the 8 principles of food in the ancient system of health and well-being called Ayurveda. What I really like about this series and what I feel Chef Rich literally brings to the table, and I've studied many Ayurvedic cookbooks and other written materials about the Ayurvedic approach to food. I've discovered few, however, written by a professional chef who is also completely in tune with what appeals to the American palate. So here, instead of presenting yet another litany of lists and do's and don'ts of what to eat if you want to try Ayurveda, Rich asks us to join him on a journey of the senses. I've discovered, and I'm sure you will too, that no one wants to embrace an Ayurvedic approach to food and health unless there is some sensory delight, meaning pleasure of the senses. So let's delve in with Chef Rich, acknowledging that initially we may feel confused, but with some practice and Ayurvedic approach to our daily food will become second nature. Naturally, we will begin to see our health transform. And once this magic starts to happen, we will want to fully embrace Ayurvedic principles. The first principle is Prakriti. We often hear this word referred to in Ayurveda to describe our own individual nature, essentially what our doshic makeup was at birth, our own mind-body type, and the North Star for the balancing principles that Ayurveda furnishes. We don't often hear it referred to when we speak about food, but food also has a Prakriti, an inherent nature. Specifically, Rich will bring us on a journey through the 6 tastes and how, according to Ayurveda, these tastes have a unique effect on our Prakriti, our own mind-body type. The second principle of food that Rich will introduce is Karana, or preparation, and how different methods of food preparation impact our physiology and mental outlook. The third principle is Samyoga, or food combining. Without becoming too rigid, we want to become aware of how Ayurveda views different combinations of food, and what are the definite faux pas and what we can regularly incorporate for maximum health and well-being. The fourth principle is Rashi, or amount. Ayurveda has a formula for the quantity that is considered too little, too much, and just right. The state of our appetite, or what is called Agni, will also be considered, as well as times of day. Caution here, we may append that universal American belief that a large breakfast is required to fuel your day. The fifth principle is Dashen, or the source of food, and where we consume the food. We are all familiar with what is now universally adopted by those who truly care about their health. Eat what grows locally and organic, if at all possible. Yet we all continue to enjoy our avocados. Rich will share the Ayurvedic view here. The sixth principle is Kala, or time, and will include daily eating habits, meaning what times a day are most appropriate and the quantity of the food for each meal. Kala, or time, also relates to each season and how our diets will change with the seasons. We will also address times of life. What we eat when we are 62 and the quantities we eat at 62 are dramatically different than what we eat when we're age 12. The seventh principle is called Upayoga Samstha, or rules for food intake. Here, Rich expounds on the culture of eating and our habits, essentially how we behave before, during, and after a meal. The eighth principle, or Upayukta, considers the person who is eating, essentially his or her mental state. In Ayurveda, these states are called Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. And also the strength of our digestion. Is it balanced or imbalanced? And how do we remedy imbalanced digestion? Now, a bit about Chef Rich. Currently, Chef Rich LaMarita calls New York City home. He was a chef instructor at the Natural Gourmet Institute in Manhattan for over 25 years. This is where Rich and I met, as I was a student there. NGI was formed by Anne Marie Colvin, a well-known proponent of the connection between food and health, also a proponent of natural foods and the author of many books pertaining to these topics, including her seminal work titled Food and Healing. While at NGI, Rich's specialties included the following: vegetarian cuisine, vegan, Indian, and Italian. Rich has also worked with numerous well-known chefs in New York City, including Floyd Cardoz, Dan Kluger, and Ben Pollinger. He has also worked as a private chef for many notable families and as a private instructor in Manhattan and the Hamptons since 1995. Rich has been a practitioner and teacher of Ayurveda for 35 years. He has studied with Vedic and Ayurvedic master Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, the founder of Transcendental Meditation, TL. Rich has led seminars on Ayurvedic diet, cooking, yoga, and meditation throughout the US, Europe, and Asia. Rich joined the Institute of Culinary Education in 2019, ICE, teaching plant-based culinary arts career classes and leading recreational classes in Ayurvedic, Asian, and vegan cuisines. He is also a graduate of Maharishi International University's master's degree program in Maharishi Ayurveda and Integrative Medicine, a program where he is currently teaching as a TA. Wow. After reading this, I hope you're as excited as I am. And I realize how special it is to have a guest like Rich LaMarita. I hope you will find this series as enjoyable as I have. Now let's dive in. Yeah, so we're gonna, food's the topic, so we're gonna just jump right in. And specifically, we're focused on Ayurveda and food. Lots of other things will come in. This is going to be the first in a series, so we're just going to jump right in, have some fun, talk about Ayurveda, all those good things. So I know, Rich, you and I talked about, hey, what's going to be useful for viewers and listeners? And one of the things you mentioned to me was, let's start off with something that I'm going to make an attempt to pronounce, but underneath it, it says the 8 principles of food, eating, and nutrition. Now, everybody loves lists, so this is really wonderful. Can you just start out? The Sanskrit term is the Ashtavid Ahara Yatam. Did I pronounce it correctly? Or am I pretty close?
Astavidya Harayatam. Astavidya Harayatam.
And translate that for me.
Sure. Astavidya is 8. So
okay.
8 principles.
Yeah.
Ahara. Ahara is a beautiful concept. It means what we take into our bodies.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously it means food and drink, okay, and liquids, but it really is an expanded definition. It means anything that comes into ourselves. So food, yes, but also our thinking, our emotions, everything that comes into us in a way we digest.
Well, that's interesting because in a way we're, it's like, we have this permeable quality, just like everything in nature. And so, we're always interacting. So the hara, we often hear of ahara in conjunction with the hara rasa.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, ahara rasa is that nutritive fluid that's when we break food down.
Yes.
That's what ahara rasa is before it enters into the body. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So awesome. So essentially, this particular term has to do with the 8 principles of food, eating, and nutrition from an Ayurvedic perspective.
Yeah.
I know the first of those principles you talked about in what you sent me is prakriti, which you describe as the nature of food. Say a little bit about that, because we don't typically think about in Ayurveda? We don't think about food having a prakriti.
Good question. Okay, so first of all, we have to understand that Ayurveda, as an ancient science of health and healing, the most ancient sciences of health and healing, has always seen food as medicine. So the ability of food to heal us, to bring health or to bring ill health, depending on what we eat and how we take in this food. So Astavidya Harayatam is these 8 principles that give a complete overview of this process. And the first principle is the actual food itself. Okay? When we think of a diet, you might say, I am vegan, I'm vegetarian, I am keto or paleo, I am omnivore, pescatarian. The emphasis is food, on the food, on the food. Okay. So this is expanding it a bit. And we're seeing this whole Astavidya Harayatam, we're seeing it as the combination or the connection of food, our digestion, and how we eat. So we're looking at right now food aspect of it, the food, the material food that we put into our bodies. Okay. So the first thing that we look at is, what are the properties of this food? Okay, so we have, let's say, an apple. What are the properties, or what are the gunas? What are the characteristics of an apple?
Okay, I'm going to stop you there because many people may not know what a guna is. They certainly understand characteristic. From an Ayurvedic perspective, why is it important to know about the qualities or the gunas of the food?
Okay, so do we need to define guna, or we're good?
I you can just go ahead and define it, just what guna is,
Okay,
and
good.
then why is it important? Because it relates to prakriti.
Yeah. Okay, first of all, a guna is very simple. Definition, it means characteristic.
Right.
What are the characteristics? Okay.
Hmm.
So let's take the apple, for instance. The apple, let's take everything we can think about the apple. It's crunchy. Okay. It's a fruit. It's sweet. It has a lot of water. Generally, we eat an apple, it's juicy, right? At the same time, it has a little, if you notice, it has, when we bite into an apple, certain apples, I mean, there's a variety of apples, of course. But generally speaking, you get a little bit of astringency in the mouth. There's a little bit of a kind of a drying effect in the mouth, even though the apple is kind of juicy. Okay. So we're looking at all these characteristics. So in Ayurveda, there's a principle, and it's called samanya. And samanya simply means the principle of similars. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
In Ayurveda, one of the key concepts of Ayurveda is that our material universe, the life around us that we know, is built on the building blocks of 5 elements, which are space, air, fire, water, and earth. Okay. And we, outside of us are these 5 elements, within us are these 5 elements. So samanya is the principle that if you have a certain characteristic within you of, let's say, space or air or fire, to a certain degree, and you add more of that element. So if you add fire to fire or water to water, obviously it increases. That's the principle of samanya, that likes or similar things increase. All right.
Yes, yes, I like that. And that is important for people considering the nature of food or the food that they're going to select, their choices, because like increases like is essentially what you're indicating in terms of similar. Everything in nature, this prakriti, is essentially the qualities of everything in nature, including our food, including our body, and that's Ayurveda. And these are the elements, and these qualities are important because if we're feeling imbalanced and we're feeling like we're too dry, it may be important. The significance is essentially that we do not want to eat a lot of dry, crunchy foods, that could bring us into a bit of an imbalance. Is that what you're
That's
driving at?
exactly what I'm saying. If you're feeling a
Yeah.
kind of dryness inside and you eat
Uh,
more dry foods, it's going to
Sure.
increase the dryness. So
Yeah.
that's how we become out. That's one of the main causes of becoming out of balance is by increasing an element or increasing the dosha within us um, to the point where it gets out of balance. So like increases like, and the opposite of that is if you have too much dryness, you need to bring in oiliness. Okay, the opposite of dry is wet or or oily in a sense. So you bring in the opposite, and that will balance you. The Ayurveda is all
Yes.
about interacting with the elements. If you're outside on a hot day and you're overdressed, um, and you start feeling uncomfortable, naturally, what do? We seek shelter under a tree and for shade. We take off one of our layers. Let's say you have a sweater and you do a jacket, you take off the jacket, you get indoors in a cool room, you go to the beach and you go swimming, you know? So
Sure. Sure.
when you bring in
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
opposite,
I
it
mean,
balances.
yeah, that's really great. And is this something that the nature of food, is it something that intuitively that we're feeling and sensing, or is Ayurveda provides us, I suppose if we're totally balanced, then we're going to make choices that are favorable and
Right,
and will maintain balance. But if we're not,
right. That's why Ayurveda.
Ayurveda gives us this roadmap.
Exactly.
Is it,
Exactly.
it
It gives us very clear knowledge of it. So for instance, let's take food. This is the very first principle of Astavidya
sure?
Haravatam.
Yeah.
So what are the properties of food? Food, Ayurveda teaches us right off the bat that food can be categorized within six tastes, six
Mm-hmm.
fundamental tastes.
Mm.
They call the name for taste in Ayurveda is called rasa. Okay, so there are six tastes. The six tastes are sweet, sour, salty, pungent, bitter, and astringent. These are the six tastes, and each of those tastes are dominant in specific elements. For instance, sweet taste is going to be composed or and I can give you the category by sweet we just don't mean sugar. There's a lot of foods in that category.
Yeah, we're not necessarily, it's not limited to refined
Yeah,
sugar.
yeah, right, exactly.
Right.
So sweet taste is going to be foods that mainly contain water and earth.
Well, that's, I mean, in American culture, we're not going to be putting together. I mean, we've heard a lot about tastes. And some people are familiar with, it's not just Ayurveda, there's other Asian systems that think about the tastes.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
my understanding with these tastes is that they have a physiological impact on the body as well as on the emotion, as well as an impact psychologically as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like for instance, a salty taste.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm feeling really flighty, the salty taste is will bring me into it's gonna sharpen things. It's gonna bring me into it's treating with the opposites, such as you indicate, you know.
Hmm.
But you're bringing it in a much more refined way in terms of the combination of the taste and the elements. So why don't you say more about that? Because that's important for Ayurveda.
Sure. So, so sweet taste. Let's start with sweet taste. Sweet taste is going to be mainly foods that have this abundance of water and earth. So examples of sweet taste, okay, would be grains, sweeteners, fruits, dairy, fresh dairy, um, as opposed to aged cheeses, things like that. Oils, nuts, and even animal protein. So these are going to be foods that are going to be mainly water and earth. So that means that if you ingest a lot of these foods, you are actually putting into your body also the elements of water and earth.
Mm-hmm.
You're putting
Right.
you're
Which
increasing.
if we translate that into the doshas, the water and the earth would be the qualities that would be most in tune with the kapha dosha. Would that be
Exactly.
correct?
Exactly. So you're going to be increasing kapha dosha by eating these foods. And these are good foods actually uh, to help uh, to help balance vata and pitta. These are good foods for vata and pitta.
Of course. So an example would be perhaps that um, thinking about the property of the food, that if somebody has a kapha imbalance, they don't necessarily, meaning there's too much of the earth and water elements, and they're a bit imbalanced in that regard. Maybe they're experiencing a lot of mucus,
Mm-hmm.
congestion. It may not be a good idea, or getting in tune with what is the property of foods, what is the nature of the food that I'm consuming. Maybe dairy would not be something that they should consume a lot of. Would that be
That's
an example?
that's a perfect example. Yes. Yes.
Okay,
A little
cool.
asterisk here. A little asterisk here is that overall, it's very important that we do get every taste every day because each of these tastes are supplying a certain kind of energy into the body. For instance, sweet taste, one of the main roles of sweet taste is that it helps to build bodily tissue, which is kapha. But it's very important that this happens. So we never want to eliminate, but
Okay.
we definitely would reduce. So the example of, a kapha person who's out of balance definitely would want to decrease their consumption of dairy, let's say. Okay. You can decrease your consumption of grains. Okay. Particularly the heavier grains and the wetter grains. For
Oh, excuse me for a moment.
Okay. Food is very complex. So, there are grains like wheat, for instance, which is heavier and contains more water and earth, rather than there are grains that are drier, like millet and quinoa. Okay.
So
So
even within a category of foods such as grains, which if we want to be really general, we can talk about most grains have a sweet taste, but there may be some that there's going to be differences in on the spectrum of grains, is what you're indicating.
exactly that again, it's never a good idea to eliminate a taste because then you're
Sure.
eliminating that overall effect in the body. But
Yeah.
you can lean towards the ones that are more suitable to you, and the ones that would be more suitable to you for a person who has a kapha imbalance, so has excess of water and earth, are the drier, lighter grains such as millet and quinoa.
Okay. That's really useful. I think the other thing that's useful from what you just indicated is you talked about the six tastes. And sometimes we hear in Ayurveda, you have to, ideally, you're going to have the six tastes at every meal. And for some people, that seems overwhelming.
Yeah, right. Did I say every meal?
Okay, so
Did I
then
say
they just throw out the towel and just say, there's just no way that I can incorporate, and they're losing the benefits of uh, Ayurvedic approach to wellness and optimum well-being. You mentioned that's a possibility, the 6 days over the course of a day.
yeah, yeah.
So if I'm just getting interested in Ayurveda, is that something I should aim for, or do I really have to be concerned about 6 tastes at one meal?
That's a great question. I think it's if you're at the beginning of your study in Ayurveda, it can be overwhelming. You can make it a little bit easy on yourself and at least try to get the 6 tastes every day. Okay.
Right. Okay.
At least try to
Okay.
get those 6 tastes every day. That's not hard to do. Um, as it begins to get more internalized, you can think about getting all the 6 tastes every meal. It's not that
Yeah.
difficult. It's not that difficult, really. There are a few sometimes that, I mean, if you understand very, kind of very quickly, you have sweet or grains. Okay, we talked about some of this food. Sour is going to be, first of all, foods that have citric acid or anything fermented. So a sour,
Yeah.
yeah,
Let's actually, you talked about the sweet and you indicated the sweet taste. And then I want to talk about like a typical meal, um, kind of an easy way to incorporate. And I know a lot of that is with condiments as well. You talked about the sweet, the water and the earth, and you gave some examples of, kind of typically how we're getting sweet taste into our diet. Talk about now sweet, sour. So let's go into sour, the sour taste.
okay, sour taste. Sour taste is going to be fire. Let me just check for a second. It's going to be mainly fire and earth element. Fire and earth
Mhm.
element. So that water element from the sweet has been turned into fire. It's going to be
Mhm.
fire and earth element is going to be the main elements. And here we're talking mainly about fermented foods, anything fermented, and anything kind of with citric acid. So oranges, lemons, limes, even a little, pineapple, that kind of tang that you get. Vinegars. These are all considered uh, sour, sour food.
Would yogurt be
Yogurt.
considered sour?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. Because
Okay.
anything fermented,
Right. Yeah.
too much fermentation, eating too many fermented foods, particularly for a pitta person, is not recommended. But some sour is very important in your diet because this sour food, what's happening here? That again, that water element from the earth, from the sweet, has been turned into fire. So how is this happening? When we ferment the food, what do? We start to let the food actually, in a way,
Well, we
go,
cook it. We cook it.
not necessarily,
I
but
mean, we cook it without fire.
we cook it without fire.
Right.
We let it age. We let it,
Right.
we let it go bad
Hmm.
under controlled circumstances,
Right.
and it kind of
Right.
starts to decompose. It
Yep.
starts to create some
It
bacteria.
trans it transforms essentially, and that's the fire element, the
Yeah,
transformation of the food. Yeah.
exactly. It transforms, and it starts to generate friendly bacteria. That's good for
Hmm.
the that's good for our gut. So it's actually not that difficult to digest because it's partially digesting outside of the body, fermented
Yeah,
food.
it's already been like partially cooked by
Exactly.
the fermentation process. Now, in Ayurveda doesn't favor fermented foods. How do you feel about that?
Ayurveda, it's an important taste, number one. So it's important
Yeah.
we get that sour taste.
Mhm.
Um, it's never a one size fit all. And,
Yeah,
for someone who's pitta,
right.
and pitta has a lot of fire, and if you're a strong pitta and you have a lot of fire, then eating too much
A
sour.
lot of, you might want to avoid kimchi, in other words.
Yeah, well, you see how, yeah, you see how it affects you, you know?
Okay.
Kimchi is sour, it's a lot of fire in it, you got heat, it's like, there's peppers in it. So there are more foods that are much more friendly, let's say, to pitta, such as lassi, for instance. Okay, having a
Yeah.
lassi after lunch, which is yogurt, which is watered down. Um, Even things like what, like sprouted grains or sourdough breads, could be good.
So I
So
know in some other natural healing food systems like macrobiotics, fermented foods are encouraged, but in the very small quantities.
right, right. You never want to overdo it with it, but I certainly don't think it's a good idea to avoid because
Okay.
it is a very good food. It's one of the six tastes.
Mm.
Its main effect on the body. I mean, you are bringing in fire. You're bringing in that fire and earth, but its main effect on the body is to strengthen digestion. It really helps with strengthening your digestion.
Yeah, that's important. You talked about the main effect on the body of the sweet taste is building the tissues. So encouraging stability and encouraging, building muscle and just ensuring that your structure, you have integration in your structure.
Yeah,
And the main function of the sour taste is really to um, encourage the digestion
exactly.
and to
That
strengthen
that
the.
is its main effect. Okay.
Okay.
Also, it's important because it helps with acid alkaline balance in the body. Uh,
Mhm.
it helps with enhancing taste. Sour food enhances taste when you drizzle a little bit of.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing, as a chef, you want to bring a little bit of that acid and a little bit of this, not too much or you're over the top, but if you bring a little bit of that sour, a
What does
little
it
bit of
do?
lemon or lime, now you've elevated the dish to something that's
Completely different. It really perks up
much
the
more
flavor.
palatable, right?
Yeah, really perks up the
Yeah.
flavor. So I think in moderation and knowing your body type is is
Right.
is uh, is essential. But sour taste
Okay.
is also an important taste. So you wanna get that taste. It's not that difficult to get into a meal. Again, all you got to do is drizzle a little bit of lemon or lime on in your food, or have a lassi after your lunch. Lassi is recommended after lunch. Um, a little bit of fresh yogurt. I mean, I don't know if you've ever making your own yogurt is very easy to do, and
I've actually started to do that, but
yeah, the
I haven't
difference.
perfected it because I don't have a thermometer, but yeah, I'm
Okay,
working on it. But
okay,
it's a completely different taste.
then store bought, right? It's like it's
Oh yeah, yeah.
delicious,
I mean, the freshness is just amazing.
right?
And like you said, it's pretty much you're not doing much at all.
Exactly, exactly.
So,
So, yeah. So this
and
kind
for some of us, that might be the best kind of cooking.
of sourdough breads are really nice. A nice healthy
Okay,
sourdough bread is delicious. Um,
beautiful.
maybe a little sauerkraut or something to add
Sure,
to your sandwich.
sure.
Okay.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You talked about lemon and lime.
hmm
Um, you're obviously familiar with Divya Alter's book, What to Eat for How You Feel.
Yeah.
She taught, which I love her Ayurveda cookbook because she talks so much just about Ayurveda and the principles. But she talks about lemon and lime, and that especially for a pitta person, lime is preferred. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's just softer and not as acidic.
Okay.
Oh, it's softer. It's not as acidic. That's just it. It's not as sour. It's kind of gentler on the body. For someone who's pitta.
Yeah, so it's not going to be quite as heating or it's going to be a little bit more balanced
Right.
for particularly for a pitta person. Okay, cool. Um, Anything else about the sour, or do you want to move on to the
Uh,
next taste?
yeah, no, that's I think we covered that because yeah, let's move on. Next is salt, salty. Okay. So salty is uh fire. The elements associated with salt are fire and water. Fire and water, which is an interesting combo because they seem to kind of normally they would put each other out, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Um, no, but in the body, it's very important. Salt, salt is something you cannot live without. It's an essential macronutrient for life. It regulates and balances our bodily fluids. We absolutely need salt in your body. Our body is, we're 60% water pretty much, and that water within our body is a saline solution. So we need salt in our diet. If you undergo a trauma of some sort, the very first thing, that the EMPs would do is give you a saline solution to balance you out. So salt
Mm.
is absolutely essential. So you should not be afraid to season your food with salt. Okay, and we could also get salt in foods such as sea vegetables. And there are
That's a good
also,
point because
yeah,
there's other foods. It's not just using
it's not just using salt.
salt, say table salt or sea
Yeah,
salt or
yeah,
let's
yeah.
talk about actually let's talk about the different kinds of salt. Because
Mhm.
generally salt is not a particularly in the American diet, which tends to be too salty because of processed foods. So if you're cooking your own food, if you don't have salt, it's just totally flat.
Exactly. Right.
Okay. So what kind of salt do you like to use? You
Okay.
hear all of these things, especially in Ayurveda, they want you to use mineral salt, the Himalayan salt, or should we use sea salt? Do we use fine or coarse, or just it really just depend? And then you hear about black salt. So tell us all about that.
Okay. I mean, there's so many different varieties of that for sure. You mentioned something that it's very important that I think we should just raise up again, and that is uh, that if you're making most of your food and you're seasoning your food with salt or using sea vegetables or other those, you can get salt in soy sauce also, for instance. Um, you shouldn't worry too much about the salt you're using. If you're eating 50 to 75% of your food from a box or a can or a bag, then we know that in order to extend the life of these processed foods, it's heavy, very heavy on the salt. So you have to watch that. Okay. But if you're doing your own food, and this is one of the reasons why we should think about mainly doing our own cooking, is you really don't have to worry too much about salt, unless of course you're under a doctor's orders. So yeah, there are many different kinds of salts out there. First of all, the kind of salt that you kind of want to avoid is the more refined, generally the more refined salt. That's salt that has either salt comes from two places. It either comes from the ocean or it comes from mountains. Okay, it's like a salt vein, like a gold vein within a mountain. So the sea or the land. Um, in any case, wherever the salt comes from, it can be refined, which means that it's washed and washed and washed, plus and cooked for a little bit, evaporated down, so that and then colored, kind of bleached, so that it looks white and it's completely void of any natural minerals in it. So it's nothing more than NaCl. Okay.
Hmm.
Um, and then these days we still see it, but
NaCl meaning sodium.
sodium, exactly,
Okay. Sure.
exactly, which is salt.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hmm.
Um, in addition to that, certain salts, because numerous years ago, like 25, 30 years ago, 40, 50 years ago, even now, it was discovered that Americans are very low in iodine, which is very important. Very
Yeah.
important mineral, particularly for your thyroid. So iodine was added to the salt,
To
um,
table salt.
to the table salt. So this is the kind of
Right.
salt you want to avoid. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
You do want to get a good quality, either sea salt or mountain salt that has its natural properties to it. So, it might not be crystal white. It might have a slight tinge to it. The Himalayan pink salt has this pink quality to it. And these are salts that have the sodium in it, but also other minerals as well. So this is a
Mm.
nice, well-balanced salt. They have great flavor. Any of those salts, in my opinion, are good. Okay, are really
Okay.
are excellent. Okay.
Sure. So what can I
I
ask you
I
what do you use for everyday cooking? Everyday cooking.
my everyday cooking, I have at least three different ones.
All
Okay.
right.
I have Himalayan pink.
Okay.
Okay. I have a salt
Mm-hmm.
that's talked about in the Ayurvedic texts, and it's called
Which
Soma,
one?
Soma salt.
That's the Soma salt is with Vaja Mishra's company, right?
Yeah, yeah. So Soma
Okay.
salt is a salt that um it's a mountain salt, but it's supposedly a salt that's that's the least heating of any salt.
Let's see. And that's Shandas, I believe, is the name of the company, right? Shandas.
I think so. I'm not 100%.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's I can find that.
Yeah.
And so what's the third salt?
And the third salt I have actually is a salt that a friend gave me from the Philippines,
Okay.
which is a sea salt from the Philippines, and it comes in a really hard block. It's very
Mm-hmm.
natural. There's like nothing taken out, um, and it's a big block like this. It's about this big, and
Oh boy.
just scrape it. I scrape it with a zester until I get enough. I have it in a little container, and I use that. Okay, so those are the
Okay.
three. Uh, then the fourth one actually is Balines. You know Balines, the brand Balines sea
I
salt.
do. I like that. I like that brand. I use that.
Yeah, it's a blue container.
Yep.
It's a really nice natural sea salt.
That's a sea salt.
Yeah.
Do you
So
use the coarse or the fine?
no, I use mainly the fine. Okay.
The fine.
Coarse sea
Okay.
salt, coarse sea salt is only used under specific circumstances, like, maybe kind of as a finishing thing or something
Finishing.
like
Okay.
that. Then I also have a few finishing salts around that I might be using for finishing. Okay.
Yeah.
For instance, I
Okay.
have Fleur de Sel, classic,
Right. Okay.
beautiful
The
French
French.
French sea salt. And you know how Fleur de Sel is made? Why it's so special?
No.
So so it comes from a certain part of the ocean in France, okay?
Hmm.
And they take the sea salt, they take the sea and they put it in a certain area, and then they let it evaporate until it's down to the salt, okay? And when you get down to that level where you start to get to the creation of the salt out of the ocean, the top layer, the very top layer of the salt is supposedly very special, and
I see.
that's what they call fleur de sel. So it's the flower of the sea.
The,
It's
right. Flower of the sea. The translation. Okay.
it's
So
the
it's the
top
creme de la creme.
Yeah, it's the top layer of this salt that they would maybe use as a regular table salt, as a regular sea salt. But this is the very, very fine, beautiful flake, very flavorful top layer. And that's Fleur de Sel. That's expensive.
And it's grayish.
Yeah, it has a little tinge to it, exactly. And it's a good finishing salt. And then I
Hmm.
also have a smoked. I have a I have a smoked I think it might be a smoked Himalayan or just a smoked salt. And it's nice just for flavor, you
Okay.
know.
So that you would maybe finishing just after the meal is cooked, just a little
Yeah,
flourish of that. Okay.
sprinkle a little bit on top of a salad or on some veggies, you know. So
Okay.
yeah, so I have a lot of different salts. I like salt. I like the taste. Personally, I like the taste of salt. Um,
Yeah, well, it adds so much to flavor. I do have a question. Maybe I'm getting a little bit into the weeds here, but I am interested in your responses, and hopefully listeners and viewers will be as well. Um, the Himalayan, I mean, if I look at Divya Alter's book, she talks a lot about the using the Himalayan pink salt. Everyday cooking, I mean, when would I use the rock salt versus a sea salt? When would I use a Himalayan pink salt versus a sea salt?
that, I think that's just personal preference.
Okay.
Yeah, there's not a huge amount of difference there. Okay.
Yeah, I just tend to go to the sea salt no matter what. I'm
Yeah,
not sure why.
that's fine. That's fine.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, you have a few out, you feel like using one over the other, you know.
okay.
That's all. It's not that's a kind of personal preference. They're so close, really, you know.
And how about you? Are there particular cuisines? Is it just the Ayurvedic and Indian that you're using the pink salt and everything else is
No,
sea salt?
no,
Or-
no, I'm mixing. I'm
Okay,
mixing. I'm mixing up. Like the baleines I generally have like in the container in a cabinet, and I might use that because it's in the box already. I might use that for seasoning water. Okay.
right.
My Himalayan pink is right out in a container. I'm just going to that very often, and so is the
Sure.
soma salt is right out.
The summer salt. Okay.
The soma salt is kind of funny to use because
It's fine, isn't it? It's very fine.
yeah, it's more powdery.
Yeah,
So it's not the easiest salt in the world, like to
I
pick up.
haven't used it. I haven't used it, so I'm not sure if it's used the same way. How about, do you have to adjust quantities with the soma salt?
No, not so much. But it's like it doesn't feel the same in your fingers as other salts.
Yeah, it's not, it doesn't have the graininess.
Right. So I generally use it with a spoon, actually.
Okay,
So I have these very small spoons right on my kitchen counter,
right.
that wooden spoons that I just would take a little teaspoon, and it might be like a quarter teaspoon or half a
Sure.
teaspoon, and just add it into the dish.
Mostly dolls for the soma salt?
Yeah, yeah, it could be dals, it could be stews or soups or even vegetables. I can just add it
Okay.
into the vegetables and potatoes or something and just toast them, you
Do you
know,
notice a difference in flavor with the soma salt?
not huge.
Okay.
Things are properly seasoned, but to tell you the truth, in the end, I don't think I could tell the difference between summer salt and Himalayan pink.
Okay. How about in the way that you feel after you eat it?
I feel fine.
Okay.
I feel fine.
Yeah. All right.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's a small part of it, you know? Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, because I think the most important thing is really tuning into how we're feeling, how we're digesting the food, you know?
yeah, yeah, yeah. You really can. There's a whole symmetry and the whole, you know, coming together, unity of all the different elements. So I can't really say, oh my gosh, it's the salt, you know, in
No,
this.
no, of course, of course.
Yeah,
And I am getting a little bit into the weeds, but these are actually questions that I've actually had about the different salts and you
yeah,
know,
no,
so thank you for really elucidating me on that. I appreciate it. So
think
I
about some of the other things that salt does. Salt absorbs
yeah,
water. Salt absorbs water, so
right.
it helps to keep the body properly kind of hydrated in a sense. It
Mhm.
softens the tissues and the organs in the body, helps relieve stiffness, cleanses the bodily vessels, promotes digestion and salivation. You know, you put salt in your mouth, it definitely stimulates salivation, enhances taste. And if you're getting a good salt, like we talked about, you're also it aids in mineral balance. So it does
There's
quite
minerals there.
yeah. So it does quite a lot. And again, you don't have to sometimes just using, I might not even use salt particularly for a certain ingredient. I might sprinkle some sea vegetable on it.
Yeah, yeah, no,
So
that's
let's
great.
say I'm roasting some veggies or something like that, and instead of salt, I have a little container of Dulce flakes,
The dulse powder flakes, yeah.
and I just
Okay.
sprinkle that, and it's
Sure,
delicious.
sure.
Or
Yeah,
I drizzle a little bit of shoyu.
yeah, yeah. So
I
that's
make I make a dish, and then I drizzle a little bit of shoyu at the end. So then I'm getting both a little bit some sour taste, and I'm getting salty taste from the shoyu without actually using the salt. Sometimes I do
yeah,
that.
and you're just, obviously it's high sodium in the shoyu, the content, but you're just being very judicious with it. You're just
Yeah, yeah, I'm going light, and at the same time, most of the time I get low sodium.
okay.
You
All
can
right,
get the low
cool.
sodium, and
That's true.
and
Yeah.
you can get what's called nama shoyu if you want to get
That's
more.
the natural, that's more the natural shoyu, right? The nama shoyu?
The nama shoyu is the unpasteurized.
Oh, unpasteurized. Okay.
So yeah, so it's very good quality and it has a lot of the good bacteria in it.
All right, cool. Well, Rich, I think we're going to continue with this. We have,
Oh, we just went through 3 tastes. We got 3 more to go.
I know, but I think we're going to continue in our next episode. So this is a series. Thank you so much for starting us off, which is where we are. Um, Wherever it goes, it goes. So it's great to take our time and just see, the questions are going to come up, and maybe I'm asking more chef questions than Ayurveda questions, but that's okay. People are interested. And yeah, so thank you so much for today. And we'll continue with the other three tastes,
Yeah.
which are
So now we know when you create a meal how to get at least those 3 tastes in. You know where to pull from the sweet in terms of grains and dairies and oils and nuts and some sweeteners. How to add sour into your meal with lemon or lime or a little bit of shoyu or a touch of
mhm.
fermented. You have salad dressing. You're going to have a little bit of vinegar and also lassi. And now we know how to get a little bit of salt into your diet. So we have 3 tastes that we covered today.
It really wasn't that, and it wasn't that difficult.
No, yeah, these are the easy ones, actually. Right, right.
Okay, all right. Well, we'll get to bitter next time. That's the toughest one, except for
That,
coffee. Everybody loves coffee.
right.
So, yeah, thanks so much today, Rich, and we will continue. Stay
Okay.
tuned.